Well, the Kraken won the game, but they might have taken a step farther from the playoffs on the day as a whole. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken go into Calgary and defeat the Flames 4-2, an important win for the wildcard race, but at the same time, the Kraken take a big hit thanks to some pretty terrible, dirty, cowardly hits from the Flames, and one little piece of crap in particular. But before we get into all that, there's another reason the Kraken might have taken a step away from the playoffs, even with the win tonight, and that is before the game, we were given the news that Alex Wennberg was going to be a scratch, which he's only been a scratch from a small handful of games over the entire history of the Kraken so far. In fact, only Adam Larsson has played more games for the Kraken up to this point, and the reason that he was scratched was for, quote, trade-related issues. So it does seem like Alex Wennberg might have played his last game for the Kraken and is likely on the way out here in the next couple days. We're just waiting for the details on whatever that trade might look like. Now, beyond that, I'm not going to spend too much more time on this Wennberg situation, at least in this video anyway, since that's all that we know at this point is that he was scratched from this game for trade-related reasons. We don't have any idea what team it could be, in spite of different people trying to spread rumors about different things. There's one rumor I saw about a first-round pick, rumors about all sorts of different teams. Really, all we know at this point is that he's likely to end up getting traded and probably has played his last game for the Kraken, which, although he doesn't put up a ton of points for the Kraken, he does offer quite a bit, especially in the transition game. I think he's one of the best players the Kraken have had over the last season plus in transition, both going towards the offensive end and in the back check the other way. And that's not even to mention how good he's been for the Kraken on the penalty kill since really the start of last season. So even though he doesn't score a ton and really doesn't shoot the puck nearly as much as a lot of people would like, he still offers this team, or has offered this team, quite a bit that I think they will miss if he is indeed on his way out. But I'll spend more time on that when we know the full story of that situation, or where he ends up getting traded to, what the return is, and all those details, especially considering this game has more than enough story in its own right. Now, of course, even before the puck drop to start the first period, this was already a game that was important to both these teams, especially the Kraken, who came into the game 2 points behind the Flames in the wildcard race, with having played the same number of games. So were the Kraken to lose this game in regulation, they'd then be 4 points behind a Flames team that's already a few points out of the playoff spot in their own right, which then obviously would not only mean the Kraken have more catching up to do to get into one of those two wildcard spots, especially with the Blues also winning tonight, another team the Kraken would be chasing, but also would mean the Kraken would have even the Flames to still catch on their way there, 4 points ahead of the Kraken if this game had flipped the other way. Instead, the Kraken are able to come out with that important win to pull even with the Flames, which certainly helps quite a bit, but the way we get there is certainly not how the Kraken would draw it up. That having been said, as we get started in the first period, with Grubauer still in net for the Kraken and a slightly different lineup with the absence of Wennberg, McCann moving down to center that second line and Tatar moving up to take McCann's spot on the wing of the first line, then obviously both Yamamoto and Cartier starting in the bottom six for the Kraken in this game. Otherwise, the same cast of characters you're used to. It's a first period for the Kraken that they absolutely dominate from start to finish. Even almost through a power play that the Flames get towards the end of this first period, which they do end up getting one shot on goal on, but that one shot on goal they get in that power play is half of the shots on goal they get through this entire period. Now, it does get off to a pretty uninteresting start between the two teams for the first couple minutes. Really not much of anything happens either way, aside from a very borderline at best, and I would certainly go so far as to say pretty dirty hit laid by Poopy Sill, or I don't know, some nobody wearing 76 for the Flames that lays a questionable, again at best, hit on Larsson along the boards into his back and side while he can't see the hit coming and has just gotten rid of the puck. And of course, probably in part because Larsson does get right up from this hit like nothing ever happened, there's no call on the play, so play just keeps on going like this is your normal shoulder check into the boards, just pretending that Larsson didn't get hit in the back of the shoulder into the boards head first in what very well could have led to an injury. Fortunately, it didn't, but the fact that there's no call on this might have had a cascading effect through later events in this game. Regardless, though, after not too much longer, the Kraken end up making the Flames pay for it where it matters most, on the scoreboard, as they get into the Flames' end of the ice and get one of the first sustained bouts of pressure that really either team has had in this game, eventually leading to a shot from Tanev, comes right out into the slot, right to Yanni Gourde, which would have been nice to see something like that happen in the game against the Oilers, where the Kraken couldn't get a puck to bounce their way to save their lives. But here, right away in the first period, comes right out into the slot to a wide open Gourde, and he buries the second chance into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 1-0 lead. Regorded is just his 8th of the season, but he's had plenty of contributions elsewhere throughout the season for this team and has a lot more value over just points production. Tannen picks up his 5th assist, and Dunn his 34th, as the Kraken take an important 1-0 lead. And it's a 1-0 lead that, somewhat unfortunately, in spite of a number of other very good chances, including one for Beniers point blank in front of the net that he just puts off the post and out later on in the first period, the Kraken, even in spite of outshooting the Flames 11-2 in this first frame, go into the first intermission with just that 1-goal lead. And at least for the first half of the second period, it does kind of start to look like the fact that Kraken weren't able to extend the lead even with that dominant first period might end up coming back to bite them, as the Flames get off to a much better start in the second, almost equaling the shots on goal by the halfway point of the period, and after a while, and given a second chance on the power play, they do eventually end up equaling things on the scoreboard with a power play goal, which this is the worst power play team at home in the NHL, so not a banner moment for the Kraken penalty kill, which otherwise has been great over the last few weeks. Though with that said, it is a bit of a fluky goal that gets past Grubauer here on the power play. It is a wraparound chance from Kuzmenko that looks like Grubauer has it stopped and frozen under his pad, but there's no whistle. And after a few whacks, eventually Kuzmenko's able to either jar it loose or somehow force it through Grubauer to get it into the back of the net, and it evens the game at 1. Which at the time it goes in is a pretty consequential goal, obviously, since this is a game-tying goal between two teams deadlocked in a playoff race. But in the end of this game, the part of this that's more relevant to the story of this game as a whole is not so much that the Flames score on this power play, and more how they ended up on the power play in the first place. Flames end up on this power play because, well, to go all the way back to the beginning, because of the officials' lack of willingness to actually do their job and correctly call what probably should have been a boarding against number 76 for that hit on Larson way at the beginning of the game. And yes, to be clear, I do actually know the real name of 76 for the Flames, even if he is still a nobody. But at this point in time, given later events in this game that we'll get to, I just don't really feel like that scumbag deserves the dignity of me saying his name the way it's supposed to be said. But anyway, that aside, because the officials don't do their job in the first period and police the game like they're paid to do on a dirty hit like that one, Cartier then, a few minutes into the second, decides to take matters into his own hands and police the game himself. So he goes up to 76, drops gloves, and then of course, like the coward he is, 76 refuses to drop gloves, at least at first anyway, which then means when this does turn into what technically isn't a fight, but it is Cartier knocking his teeth in, which was fun to see. It then results in traded roughings between the two of them, but Cartier picks up a second roughing, which sends the Flames to that power play. Now, fortunately, the game would not stay tied too long, as the Kraken, a few minutes later, into the back half of the second period, on a great forecheck from McCann, take back the lead, as McCann creates a turnover behind the Calgary net, gets the puck out in front for a one-timer from Bjorkstrand, and Bjorkstrand makes no mistake, beating Markstrom to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead. For Bjorkstrand, it's his third goal, I think, in 4 games now, and 16th of the season. And thanks to a pretty uneventful last 7 or 8 minutes of the second period, it's a 2-1 lead that the Kraken carry into the second intermission and start of a third period, which as always is a good sign for the Kraken that they have that lead going into the final 20 minutes. It's an even better sign when 21 seconds into the period, the Kraken get right into the offensive zone, and it's Adam Larsson off of a pretty similar pass to what McCann had out to Bjorkstrand, a beautiful pass from Beniers that gets out to Larsson in the slot, and he buries the shot into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 3-1 lead, less than 30 seconds here into the third. For Larsson, it's his 4th goal of the season, Beniers picks up his 17th assist with the primary, and Eberle picks up his 22nd with the secondary. And then, a couple minutes later, the rest of the third period happens, which just turns into almost complete chaos. The Kraken get the first chance on the power play of the period, their first power play of the game, while the Flames had a power play in each of the first and second period, and it's a power play for the Kraken that really never goes much of anywhere, so we go back to 5-on-5 with that having been killed off. And just a couple minutes later, the Flames pull back to within 1. This time the Flames goal comes not only at 5-on-5, but also off just a nice wrist shot from Kuzmenko on a nice play by the Flames. Kuzmenko, the ex-Canuck, picking up his second goal of the game and bringing the Flames back to within 1, beating Grubauer certainly a lot cleaner than he did the first time. And then just seconds later, the Flames end up on a power play. A power play that they very nearly end up scoring on a couple of occasions, including one towards the end of it that's a bouncing puck towards the net that ends up going off of the post and then landing next to the net in the crease behind Grubauer, but he's able to reach back and get his glove on it just before the Flames can get a stick on it, keeping that one out of the net, and thankfully maintaining that lead for the Kraken as they're able to get through this power play without too much trouble. But go figure, no sooner did the Kraken finish off that kill successfully, they send the Flames right back to the power play, still with just a 1-goal lead, and now definitely flirting with giving the Flames a chance to tie things back up here midway through the third. Fortunately, this penalty kill, which was caused by Alexiak hitting, I want to say Kuzmenko with a high stick, lucky to get just a 2-minute minor and not a 4-minute double minor. Either way, this penalty kill fortunately goes a lot better for the Kraken than the previous one did. Now, fortunately, they were able to survive that one, even for how dangerous of a power play it looked like for the Flames. This one, though, it starts to show why this is not a very good power play the Flames have. 30th in the NHL, and like I already said, 32nd at home. As the Kraken end up getting the better scoring chances, both of the better scoring chances in this power play. Towards the end of it, it's first McCann who creates a turnover, getting it down the ice, with Gord coming with him. McCann can't quite get a clean shot off, but he is able to find Gord next to the net, who almost slams it into the side, but just partially whiffs on it and can't quite get all the puck, so the Flames, mercifully for them, are able to survive that, get the puck back to the other end. But once again, it's McCann creating a turnover at the blue line, this time breaking it out the other way on a full breakaway. He skates in and buries it for the shorthanded goal, his first shorthanded goal of the season, and 26th overall. So then with this unassisted goal from McCann, making it 4-2 Kraken, which, as you've already seen in the beginning of the video, is the final score of the game, and with the Kraken spending the vast majority of the remainder of the third period on the power play, you'd think that we could pretty much just call it there. The Kraken obviously don't do anything with that power play time as far as extending the score is concerned, and they don't allow the Flames to do anything either to make it interesting at the end of the game. Instead, though, unfortunately, the last few minutes of this third period turn out to be very, very consequential for the Kraken, and could even end up hurting the Kraken chances of making the playoffs more than this win helped. As not long, in fact, I think less than a minute after that second Flames power play comes to an end, the one that McCann scores in the final seconds of, it's Vince Dunn with the puck behind the Kraken net with his back turned to the play, and yes, he does have the puck, so in that way, it's not quite as bad maybe as some of the other hits we've seen Kraken players take already this season or earlier on last season, just in their history. There's been some bad hits Kraken players have taken like this. Heck, Larson had one earlier in this game, but at least that he took the hit more to the back of the shoulder than right between the numbers, like Vince Dunn does here. And once again, this scummy, cowardly, dirty hit comes from the same irrelevant, useless, apparently the only reason he exists is to try to injure Kraken players, number 76, that tried to injure Larson earlier on in the game. And apparently he didn't learn his lesson from Cartier beating his face in midway through the game. He once again goes right after a Kraken player, lays an absolutely unforgivable hit that should get him suspended for a good chunk of games, and being that he really has no business being in the league otherwise, you'd like to see him just kicked out in general. Which admittedly is maybe taking it a little bit too far with that last part, but I think I can be forgiven for having the best Kraken player, or certainly one of the two best Kraken players, and their best defenseman taken out by an irrelevant fourth line nobody for the Flames in a wild card race between these two teams. And it's not like this was a one-off from this guy. It's already the second unforgivable dirty hit that he's laid this game, and the first one that has any consequences whatsoever from an official standpoint. As fortunately, the officials do correctly call this one boarding and end up giving him a game misconduct and kicking him out of the game. But even at that, it's still pretty much a win for the Flames. They just, even if he does get suspended, lose some nobody they can replace for a couple of games, then he'll come back. Meanwhile, the Kraken could very well be missing Vince Dunn, again, one of their better players and their best defenseman, for an extended period of time. He could just as easily be back the next game, but the way he went down, I certainly am not expecting him to be back for the second half of a back-to-back, much less in the near future. As he went down holding his head and neck, did get up of his own accord, so that is a good sign that he was able to get up and get himself off the ice, but he immediately went down the tunnel, holding the side of his neck and head, which is not a good sign by any stretch of the imagination, based on the way he went into the boards, head first, with his head kind of going sideways into the neck, and then carrying all that weight of that hit into those not that forgiving glass boards. And on top of all that, I swear, if I hear one more time following this hit and how this game played out, about how hockey needs fighting so that players have a chance to police the games themselves, I'm not gonna lose that. I know fighting's always gonna be a part of hockey, but I will feel more than free to point out how just incredibly stupid of a take that is. look, I know, again, fighting is always going to be a part of hockey. It always has been. It's always going to be there as a sideshow that some fans enjoy. I personally, I mean, look, I won't lie that I find it entertaining when it happens, but it's not a part of hockey that I particularly enjoy. But even if it isn't my favorite part of the game, I do recognize that a lot of people like it, and it always riles up a crowd whenever a fight happens. Plus, at least as hockey stands right now, it's enough of a sideshow that it doesn't detract from the game. So as long as it stays a sideshow and not becomes once again the main show like it kind of was for a chunk there in like the 70s and even a chunk of the 80s, then fine, whatever. But let's stop pretending we can debunk the myth that it has anything to do with policing the game. Because we saw all in one perfect little package of a single game right here, how one nobody of a player goes in, almost takes out one of the Kraken top defensemen early on in the game. There's no call, so the Kraken try to go and police the game themselves. There's a fight, the guy gets his teeth knocked in, and then still comes back and lays an even worse hit later in the game that does knock out another one of the Kraken top defensemen. But anyway, all that being said, and ranting aside, hopefully Dunn ends up being okay and doesn't miss too much time. Again, I'd be pretty surprised if nothing else he misses the second half of the back-to-back in Winnipeg. And at very least, hopefully is back for the first game of the homestand. The next homestand also against Winnipeg as the Kraken play the Jets for each of the next two games. And at the very least, it was nice to see that Cartier came up to defend Larsson's bad hit earlier on in the game, or the hit against Larsson earlier on in the game with that fight, and knocked the guy, well, not senseless. He didn't really have a lot of sense to begin with, as evidenced by both of the hits that he lays on two players in the game. He also had a bit of a late hit on Eberle midway through the game that really wasn't that dirty, so you don't think that much of it if it wasn't for the other hits that he laid on both of the two Kraken top pairing defensemen. And once again, after this horrendous, unforgivable, unexcusable hit on Dunn, it was once again nice to see the Kraken coming to the defense of their teammate in Dunn. It was Matty Beniers of all players first on the scene, immediately going after Poopy Sill, or whatever you want to call him, knocking his helmet partially off. Beniers ends up having his helmet ripped off from behind him. So yeah, again, just another sign that the officials basically let anything go in those scrums. At the very least, though, the Kraken showed that they're going to stick up for teammates. I would say that they're not going to let that kind of thing stand, but again, policing the game doesn't really matter. It's not like it's going to stop this guy from going after another player in whatever game he plays next after what hopefully is a lengthy suspension. And for the Kraken, they still are probably going to miss Vince Dunn for a few games. Oh yeah, and I probably shouldn't forget that with the Flames in particular, this is already not the first time this season that they've gone headhunting after Seattle's best players. As way back in November, if you've forgotten, that was when in Seattle, Mangiapane came up behind McCann, who was prone on the ice, laying on his stomach, and cross-checked him in the back of the head, slamming his face into the ice, which did knock McCann out for a couple of games, and Mangiapane saw no real retribution for that. Anyway, as far as the game itself is concerned, the Kraken do get a 5-minute major out of this hit on Dunn, so they do correctly assess a major penalty. Even with that being said, it only lasts a couple minutes before Tolvanen gets called for a hooking penalty that is as much hooking as giving a stranger a friendly wave on the street is. He barely even touches, if he touches the player with his stick. They still call it hooking. It goes to 4-on-4, which eventually the Flames turn into a 5-on-4 chance going empty net, which they then continue to keep the net empty when Tolvanen comes back out on the ice. So it's a rare 5-on-5 with an empty net. The Kraken never find that empty net, do end up getting another power play later on. All of it ends up not mattering. The Kraken don't score again with all of that extra power play time, but still do come out with the important 4-2 victory and the 2 points in the standings, while making sure the Flames get nothing. So as far as takeaways from this game are concerned, it's obviously a good sign the Kraken continue to play well, as they really have over certainly the last 4 games and even 5 of the last 6 if you take out whatever happened in that game against the Wild. They even played pretty well in that last game that they lost against the Oilers. They just couldn't get a bounce to go their way. So they continue that momentum going forward, but obviously losing Wennberg to a potential trade doesn't help, and now potentially losing Dunn for what, I mean, honestly, the way he went down, worst case scenario could be the rest of the season, but it's all speculation at this point. For all we know, he could come back and play the next game against Winnipeg, though, again, like I've said a couple times, that would be a shock. At least for now, though, again, with this being the first half of a back-to-back, I think we've spent enough time on this game, so we'll close out here with the Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon if you want to help decide the Kraken 3 stars after every game, and there were a lot of players to choose from in this game for the Kraken. You can help support the channel a little bit more than you already are by watching to this point by going to the link to Patreon down below and supporting over there as well. And this is one where, I mean, even Patreon kind of shows there's any number of players that could be considered. The first star, though, I think I gotta go with Jared McCann. He has the shorthanded goal that really puts this game away for the Kraken, as well as an assist on the first goal. And then past that, it's any number of players. Tanev gets mentioned a couple of times, so I'll give Tanev a second star. He does end up with a number of huge key blocks over the course of this game. He really paid for it when it came to just taking pucks all over his body during the course of this game. Gordon Bjorkstrand each had very good games and each had a goal. Dunn and Larson also played very well. In fact, I'd probably say the two of them would be my choices maybe for 1 and 2 if it was fully up to me. But the third star, I am going to go off of the board, and I'm going to go with Ty Cartier, if for absolutely no other reason than he was the one that got those punches right to the face of that scumbag number 76. But as always, though, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars would be. Like I said, there's any number of players you could choose from. I wouldn't even argue too much if you pick 3 entirely different guys than the ones that I have here as my 3. And until next time, which will be tomorrow against the Jets, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken! And hopefully Dunn is okay.